In the second and final wrap-up lesson, I want to elaborate on a concept we covered in some detail in an earlier lesson. White-collar crime. If you remember, I included in that lesson more or less an official governmental interpretation of what constitutes white-collar or elite crime. And I think it provides an excellent opportunity to apply the sociological imagination or perspective. Bear in mind that participants more often than not come from middle and upper social classes. They're folks who are likely to have authority and status within an organization or a company. Put in another way, white-collar criminals are literally, again, part of the system. They hold positions that allow them to carry out illegal activities without necessarily being recognized. And generally, these folks commit crimes that are not only difficult to identify, but also to investigate and prosecute. Ferrante notes, for example, that these crimes, white-collar or elite crimes, aren't really focused on a particular or specific person who can then turn around and report the crime to law enforcement officials, but rather they tend to be oriented at arrangements that are somewhat vague, hard to define, and are impersonal in nature. Some examples she uses: the competitors, the Internal Revenue Service, or the physical environment. Now, as noted in the earlier lesson on white-collar crime, this type is quite common. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners did a study in 2012, and they estimated that $3.5 trillion was lost to job-related fraud in the year 2011. Now, if you remember that earlier lesson on white-collar crime, and is also noted in the text in Chapter 6, many authorities suggest that on average, white-collar or elite crime costs $500 billion annually. I just gave you a figure related only to fraud. Now, this form of crime, fraud, is changing with the times and with new opportunities. Each year, forms of online fraud in particular, that's ID theft, real estate fraud, and the like, have been increasing rather dramatically. Kendall highlights that internet-based crimes have increased because the perpetrators can change their tactics or their approaches with little or no difficulty. She highlights FBI data on internet crimes, which notes that, again, these types of crimes annually cost $525 million. Now, at the same time, you want to remember that white-collar or elite crime isn't only costly in terms of money that is lost, but also it's costly in terms of lives lost. This is a direct result of selling unsafe foods, unsafe drugs, defective or dangerous products. You remember the Pinto that we discussed earlier, produced by Ford Motor Company, as well as water and air pollution. As a matter of fact, most researchers would argue the number of deaths from white-collar crimes are much higher than deaths resulting from a homicide each year. Another key cost, don't underestimate this one. White-collar and elite crime can undermine trust and confidence within the overall system on the part of the general public. Some of you might remember Occupy Wall Street and similar protest-type movements. They targeted how the collapse of the financial and housing markets was due in part to risky lending practices and individual and corporate greed. The movements also argue that overall this has significantly damaged opportunities and overall lifestyles. Now, sociologists who have employed the sociological perspective have recognized that the type of crime that we're talking about here can be related to some models of deviance that we discussed earlier. For example, let's apply the strain model. What's important for any corporation or company? Well, it's financial success. For example, it's illegal for American corporations to do anything contrary to the interests of the stockholders. Now, what can cut into profits? Well, expensive equipment, safety devices. Many owners and workers may become much more concerned with profits as a mark of success than with any short-term or long-term consequences of their actions. They might also be willing to employ or to create innovative responses, perhaps some of these illicit, illegal, criminal, in order to increase financial success. And this can even be applied in the context of globalization. In some poorer countries around the world, migrants from rural areas have flocked to cities, seeking job opportunities. Now, for the governments of these countries, they may consider these folks to be a potentially unstable population. So the governments of these countries may work very hard to attract foreign companies so as to provide jobs for these migrants. And as a way to entice foreign companies to come to their country, they do away with any environmental or workplace safety requirements. Now, on the other hand, white-collar crime could be framed within the context of the differential association model. Bear in mind that white-collar crimes take place in environments where profits are expected and encouraged. So it's possible that a person joins a company or an organization and they recognize that, again, certain activities are being initiated or undertaken by people within the organization, and they buy into it. Everybody's doing it. It seems to be right, good, and proper. Go back to the study that I shared with you earlier. Do you remember Williams' 1989 study in which he focused on a group of teens who sold cocaine in a section of New York City? If you remember, the drug suppliers deliberately recruited these young folk because they knew if these young people got caught, they wouldn't be sent to jail because they were minors. Now, this highlights what Williams has referred to as illegitimate opportunity structures. This is pretty much how he defined it. Now, if you focus on his study of teens recruited by suppliers to sell cocaine, this highlights something interesting. Society gives minors opportunities to get involved in crimes without risking full legal penalties. So, illegitimate opportunity structures can play a role in the type of crimes committed. Some examples that Ferrante and others have used: firefighters, police officers. Their jobs provide them with opportunities to steal valuable goods after gaining access to a home. Now, nobody's suggesting they're going to do this, but the opportunity is there. On the other hand, an accountant has an opportunity to, if you will, cook the books. This cartoon kind of illustrates the point. Or, on the other hand, think of a pharmacist. Working as a pharmacist provides a chance for the person to steal prescription drugs, either to sell or, on the other hand, to feed his or her personal habit or that of a friend or a family member. Now, white-collar criminals can also benefit from these illegitimate opportunity structures. Think about it for just a moment. In the case of corporation-based crime, simply by doing their jobs, everyone who works for the organization contributes to illegal activities. So Ferrante, employing again the sociological imagination or perspective, makes this interesting point, and that's a direct quote. The concept of illegitimate opportunity structures challenges the belief that uneducated and people in certain minority groups are more prone to criminal behaviors than those of other groups. I'll go over that again. Challenges the belief that the uneducated and people in certain minority groups are more prone to criminal behaviors than those in other groups. It's important that you remember people in all social classes commit crimes. However, the type of crime, how laws are enforced, the availability of legal support or aid, and the ability to get around or sidestep legal restrictions is going to vary significantly by the social class of the perpetrator. For example, in a report issued by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, 51% sentenced to terms in U.S. federal prisons were classed as drug offenders, but less than 1% of those sentenced were considered white-collar criminals. Further, keep in mind that law enforcement activities and efforts are primarily directed toward controlling what a lot of people consider to be regular crime or quote-unquote street crime, that which is directed against property and individual life. Also, bear in mind something that we discussed in the earlier lesson on white-collar crime. White-collar criminal offenses are largely handled by regulatory agencies like the Food and Drug Administration or the Environmental Protection Agency. And you want to remember these organizations have limited staffs to monitor whether or not companies and organizations are following the established rules. And if people or companies are charged with white-collar offenses, the cases are usually dealt with, do you remember, civil courts, not criminal courts. So, therefore, in the end, it's much easier for white-collar criminals to get away with it, to escape punishment. So my hope is that these last two kind of follow-up lessons have helped you to better appreciate the significance and the importance of the sociological perspective. Ever seen a crime scene like this one? I doubt it. Once again, bear in mind the significance of power, social class, authority. Furthermore, bear in mind that although we are unique individuals, and yes, we do have to take responsibilities for our actions can be motivated or at least powerfully influenced, or, if you wish, significantly influenced by our social locations and by larger social factors. Furthermore, I hope the course has helped you to better appreciate the fact that you and I are social creatures. Who we are, what we become, has been significantly shaped by our interaction with others. Furthermore, bear in mind, and I hope that you will always apply this, that much of our behavior exhibits patterns and regularities. Some are obvious, some are subtle. But remember, these aren't chiseled in stone. Who created them in the first place? Well, we have, and we do. Furthermore, that third and final theme, change. if we create patterns and regularities, we can alter them, we can change them, we can discard them. We are social. Thank you for enrolling in the class. I hope it has been truly an educational experience, a true journey of discovery. Best of luck to all of you in your further academic pursuits and likewise in your efforts to secure a well-paying job. Have a good life. And remember again, balance the individual with the social.